Welcome to the Passive House podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, inspiration, and connections from all flavors of Passive House, check out passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your technical questions answered, and contribute to the community forum. There's loads of free information for experienced professionals and people just starting out on their Passive House journey. We hope to see you at one of our construction tech or weekly Global Passive House Showcase webinars. Well, welcome back to the Passive House podcast. I'm Matthew Cutler-Welsh, coming to you from Auckland in New Zealand.
And I'm Zack, coming to you from Seattle, Washington.
And this week, we've got a couple of shows this week. We've got a special episode. This is a component spotlight. So tell us a little bit about today's guest that you've got, Zack.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to be speaking with Hugh Whiriskey of Partel. And Hugh, Partel's offices are in Galway. So this is Western Ireland. And Hugh is an engineer, a former practitioner of high performance building, and now a designer and manufacturer and a leader in high performance building products that are key to passive house practice. So Partel has distribution throughout Ireland and UK and Europe and North America. And we talk about his kind of journey to his work at Partel, the relationship between the code kind of regulations that are going on in the UK and Ireland, and the advancement of passive house, and what that means for high performance building products and what that means for Partel. It's a really interesting dive into Hugh's world and the world of Partel.
Awesome. Well, let's crack into it. So here he is, your conversation with Hugh, from coming to us from Galway in Ireland.
Well, welcome to this special episode of the Passive House podcast. This is a Passive House component episode, and I am very happy to be sitting down with Hugh Whiriskey, who is the founder and technical director at Partel. Partel is one of the early supporters of the Passive House Accelerator and is a leader in high performance building products. Hugh, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Zack. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to this. So could we start by having you tell us a bit about your background and about Partel?
Yeah, of course. I guess I'm qualified as a civil engineer, and I've kind of always worked in construction in some way, be it residential or commercial. And within that, I've always been connected to the offsite methods, so really timber framing, maybe more so. I worked on early timber frame projects maybe 20 years ago, and they were quite good. They used natural materials, but they were a really good learning experience for kind of what could be right, maybe inappropriate, what could be improved. I would have worked in most areas of construction, commercial, residential, and even some of the larger commercial projects. In about 2007, I did form with my business partner, Michael Holland, an architecture and engineering consultancy firm, and that still exists. But it's through that business that things really accelerated towards passive house construction and generally better quality building. That was actually kind of the year before the recession, so a really good time to start a business in one way. But it was interesting. So we also founded Partel a couple of years later, so I guess both businesses kind of went through that period. So it definitely became really interesting. So the idea with Partel was to, I suppose, create something that mirrored our values, something that we could, I suppose, find a way to provide quality, bespoke building envelope materials, honest, knowledgeable advice, and I suppose real technical solutions. And the market at that time was quite different. It was really very limited and kind of dominated by, I suppose, what I'd call sales companies with fixed kind of product ranges that didn't really suit all markets and tended to use older or most, maybe less modern technology. And that's something that kind of happens quite often. So maybe companies don't refresh if they've got a lot of certification with older products. So we wanted to avoid that. I suppose we knew we had a really good skill set in consultancy, energy modeling. We knew really well how buildings worked and performed, and I suppose that was part of it. We did go a good bit deeper into the building physics side of things, and I guess that was a kind of a slippery slope for me, Zach, and that's kind of why we are here now. So I found that I suppose I'm the type of person that needs to know everything about the process. So the raw materials, how things are manufactured, kind of why they're designed in a specific way, and what's the right application options. And we tried to think freshly about everything, kind of from the ground up, with a new look, maybe initially suited to our markets. We ended up with, currently more than 30 products developed under the Partel umbrella. And they've all got very, I suppose, precise advantages, and it could have been something that was developed for a manufacturing process, for technical advantages, the site conditions that we work in, that kind of thing. But yeah, overall, we've tried to be introduce any products without a clear reason. So we try to bring something different or new or appropriate. And the kind of journey for Partel has been really, really interesting. So the product development, the consultancy, the building physics, I would say kind of easy and fun, Zach. But the other things, I guess, which we didn't know was, supply chains, manufacturing, QA, the internal and external, the sales, logistics. In particular this year, that's been quite an experience. But yeah, we're in a good place with all of that right now.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and it seems like having that perspective as a consultant and designer in part of your professional life would be really useful for informing the product development and where their needs are. So that seems like a really powerful combination. Yeah,
that's kind of what we found. It allows us to relate well to, I suppose, specifiers, and the on-site experience has been good in that regard as well.
So what does the passive house industry look like in Ireland and the UK? I know those are your original markets. I'd love to hear your perspectives on where things are and what the future of passive house looks like there.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I guess the markets are pretty different, the UK and Ireland, but they did start kind of at the same time and in a similar way. When we formed in 2011, Ireland had or was close to the highest number of passive house designers per capita worldwide. Basically, Tomás O'Leary and
right. Force of nature.
He's to blame. Yeah. So it really generated a huge awareness and kind of helped to shape and advance the industry in Ireland. And I think construction in Ireland, still kind of has that impact. And really, architects, engineers, builders, they really embraced it and became competitive with results, but still shared, I guess, the information in the way the passive house community normally does. The momentum for certification definitely tapered off as the market kind of became busy and recovered, post-recession. But what we're seeing now is that the standard is really coming back into focus. It seems that people are looking for, I suppose, real reasons to, respect their corporate responsibility. So the funds are starting to look for different edges to, maybe differentiate them from others. And maybe people that Tomás has trained have found themselves in I suppose positions of responsibility as well, that kind of thing. So it's influenced the market a lot. The UK kind of, like I said, started in a similar way, but they have and kind of had a vibrant community kind of from the start, and that really still exists. maybe in a similar way, the momentum for new certifiers and new projects has stopped kind of adding to that community. But the same thing is happening there. So the courses or the people that are training via the Passive House Academy, they are mainly UK based these days. So there's some really, really interesting large-scale projects going to start quite soon in the UK, and councils looking at retrofits and passive house construction for new builds.
That's exciting. That's good. Good to hear. Yeah. So, in terms of regulations and so building regulations and energy standards in Ireland and the UK, I mean, I gather that things are in a different place there than they are in North America. So how do airtightness and thermal bridging and ventilation work in those regulations, and how do you view their importance or development?
Okay, so I guess Ireland has traditionally followed the UK in building standards, but that actually reversed over the past 10 years. So Ireland started to go ahead by quite a bit. So generally the building standards in Ireland are quite close to passive house, excluding airtightness. Fortunately, people ignore the building standard with airtightness in Ireland. So the standard is 5. The average for all builders, so everyone grouped together, is they're achieving about 2.25. So that's reducing all the time. The UK has a current standard of 10 in airtightness, and that's due to be reduced maybe only to 7 is kind of how it looks. So the UK would have a lot of really large house builders that maybe would favor less stringent building requirements. I guess the same thing that kind of happens everywhere. So
yeah, that's for sure.
Yes. Other things like thermal bridging, I guess, in Ireland and the UK, the standards have always been there. People kind of just haven't been applying them. So that kind of compliance is really changing in Ireland. So people are embracing thermal bridging. It's a real kind of emerging area, and there is advantages to people who kind of, let's say, develop a real kind of set of well thought out and I suppose certified thermal bridging details, so they can adopt a fabric first approach, and for builders working on scale, it can make kind of big savings. Ventilation in Ireland got really interesting this year because they have introduced this new validation scheme. So we always had to design systems thoroughly, but ultimately nobody checked them, and that was kind of the problem. So from now, a third-party consultant will come and they'll check that the airflows in every single room in every building are actually meeting the design flow rates. So I guess you guys are kind of used to that more than we are, but that's pretty new for Ireland and not something that's happened in the UK, but it's really good quality control elements.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, I suppose, look, overall, you're kind of asking in terms of importance. You'll see our business model is always connected to airtightness, thermal bridging, and ventilation. Those are the 3. So we're, very much kind of committed to the development of those, and I suppose promoting quality with that.
When it comes to, creating a durable building envelope, I mean, you're working and supplying projects in different regions. How does the climate of a particular project change the rules of the design structure and airtightness systems that need to be installed?
Yeah, I guess we're working in most climate zones. So we do find that we kind of firstly need to understand the project, the other products that are being used, and the outcomes that people are looking for. So we, I suppose, have developed products that can cater for all climate types, but we do need to be pretty careful about the correct specifications. So we also kind of try to factor in weather, sunlight, all that kind of thing. And it brings us back to the WUFI analysis, which is something we provide on request. We like it, and it gives you that kind of certainty and helps us understand the risks that people are willing to take. And generally, you can advise quite a safe build-up, and it mightn't always be our products, but we might see something else in the build-up that can be adjusted and improved to make it a little safer.
That role of helping to guide decision making with WUFI and also points to this need for training and kind of continuous process of education more broadly. So how are you seeing that? How is that important in your world for getting the results that we're looking for in these buildings?
Yeah, it's a good I suppose a good aspect to focus on, because training, for airtightness, if we focus on that, it tends not to exist outside of the passive house world. So in Ireland, there has been a development of NZEB training centres, so nearly zero energy building, and airtightness is a huge focus for that. We also support pretty much anyone who's doing airtightness training worldwide, from EMU Systems near you or worldwide to Passive House Academy, and there's lots more. So we support those. We do believe that professionals and installers should get upskilling in airtightness. So we're actually working on something quite interesting, and we'll be sure to let you guys know. But we've something coming out that will help to improve the upskilling of people with regard to airtightness.
Oh, very interesting. You've sparked my curiosity there.
Yeah,
awesome.
it's kind of missing at the moment, and as products change and develop, people should ideally get a hands-on from the manufacturers first.
Let's talk about air quality. I mean, a lot of attention, rightly so, is being directed toward the quality of air in our buildings for all sorts of reasons, right? And we know that that's an essential part of creating a healthy building is creating superior indoor air quality. Can you talk a little bit, therefore, about off-gassing, VOCs, and humidity, and that the relationship with your tapes and membranes? How are your products interacting with those elements that determine air quality?
Yeah. So I guess for what's kind of a small product, we do ask a lot from our airtight systems. So one of its, aside from preventing air leakage and controlling vapor and managing the construction, we do want them to protect the occupants from off-gassing of products chosen in the building envelope. Or from outside pollutants, but kind of separately to that, the products themselves need to be essentially VOC free. So we have the EMICode EC1 Plus test on pretty much all of our tapes. So it means the system itself, in combination with what it's doing, isn't contributing any harmful VOCs. So that's definitely an area that's going to get a lot of focus in the next few years as the cost of sensors and people's awareness changes.
No kidding. Mm-hmm.
And it's something, once you investigate, it's kind of hard to go back. And VOCs are really, really interesting. It's surprising kind of how bad they can be and how easily they can be bad.
Yeah, I've experienced that. We have a couple of air monitors in our house now, and sometimes it's really clear what causes a spike in VOCs, and other times it's very mysterious. And we live in an old house that has, I don't know, probably plenty of surprises in the walls. I don't know what's going on.
Who knows?
Or maybe it's that new piece of IKEA furniture too. I mean, I definitely wonder about the off-gassing of the bunk bed in our daughter's room.
we have a lot to learn in that space, I guess. So
no kidding. So you're working and supplying projects that are on the cutting edge. That's part of what is, I think, exciting for all of us in this industry, right? That's not without its challenges. So what are some of the biggest challenges you're facing in projects right now, and how are you tackling those challenges?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge in the market in this region is the retrofit market. So we have this enormous old housing stock in the UK and Ireland, and it's becoming a more constant source of discussion. Most countries have signed up to really ambitious targets that honestly, they look impossible to achieve without really dramatic changes in policy or incentives, and they really need to be aggressive. So
Yeah.
there's one small council in London that we're, I guess, indirectly working with, but it's 36,000 houses, and it's just a tiny little portion, and they all need to be upgraded, and the budget is substantial, but even with that budget, it was looking like 100 years to retrofit the stock. So it's a colossal problem, and really needs some kind of aggressive incentives to accelerate that. Ultimately, in Europe, most countries, if they fail to meet the targets, will end up paying penalties anyway. So it's meet the targets or pay the penalty. So yeah, we hope the governments can make kind of aggressive decisions to help accelerate that.
Yeah.
Labor is a labor is a big problem with the retrofit market as well.
Yeah, everywhere. Hopefully, we'll get some government action and commitments here around the COP conference that's about to happen in Glasgow. We can cross our fingers. Yeah, retrofits are so critically important. So, in terms of, and I just mentioned the COP conference, and so that takes us to carbon. My sense is that reducing carbon footprint and driving climate-wise and sustainable building practice is a driver for you. Is that the case?
Yeah.
What are your key motivators at Partel?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's good that it's now being talked about as openly as it is, and you're right that we would have always kind of been looking at that, and we know our products contribute positively to low energy construction ourselves. We're moving quite quickly in that space with how products are manufactured and materials are sourced for that. It's possible to move away from the fossil industry and use sustainable and recycled where possible. There's an environmental product declaration program. I'm not sure. Are you aware of it? It's a international EPD. Yeah. So we're very committed to that, and we're pretty much putting all of our products through that. They are a small part of the overall dwelling generally, but all the same, we're putting them through it. So I suppose we're doing a lot of training and trying to educate people on embodied carbon. And while that word is talked about a lot, I kind of get the impression that it's not fully understood. The tools to analyze it are, same token, they're just not mainstream right now. So it's really important that we, I suppose, develop projects and get the industry aware and talking about, what it means and what the life cycle of a building actually means, and from that, what we can do to improve it. So we'll definitely be, I suppose, active in that. We're developing a new office ourselves here, and it'll be, I suppose, a landmark building in terms of carbon. So we'll be using it as look, this is what we did, and this is what you can do. It can be uncomplicated. So it'll be a certified passive house, but as much as we can will be locally sourced, low carbon building products.
You just alluded to recycled products. You talked about life cycle. You are using recycled plastic bottles, is that right? For the Almavert, your thermal bridge project or product. Can you talk about that? That sounds really cool.
Yeah, it is a cool product, right? Yes, we were able to bring it out in 2019. It's a really, really interesting and easy to use product, but for sure, yeah, it's 100% up to 100% PET recycled material, and even at the end of its life cycle, it's recyclable again. It's an uncomplicated product once produced, but yeah, it's a structural insulation. So underneath windows and doors, or supporting windows and doors, if they project into an insulation layer, a really kind of easy to use product. Kind of no reason not to use it is kind of how we would look at it. So it's getting a lot of traction, to be honest. And yeah, it's kind of an easy choice for someone to make if they're presented with the fossil fuel alternative.
You just talked about your new facility that you're planning as a landmark kind of case study around low carbon. What are some other projects that have been kind of most interesting that you've worked on?
Um, yeah, there's been all sorts, Zach, but I tend to favor myself the less complicated, the simple project. So one that we're working on right now is it's an retrofit system for existing homes. We're working on it with a few different parties in the UK, and the idea is where we'll take an existing, let's say, brick or relatively poorly built building, and completely build outside that using an I-beam cellulose, the Partel products, and a rain screen. So we're um, pretty active in that one, in that we're running a blower door test first. We're kind of deciding how much air leakage there can be in the brick layer itself. We then introduce our system, finalize the airtightness on the outside. So we can actually upgrade Enerfit completely from the exterior. There is some wood fiber used as well as the cellulose, but it's something that can become a scaled solution. So we're using sensors, and we're calculating the CO2 footprint for those buildings. So things like that are kind of what I guess are interesting for me.
The whole outfit initiative at PHI was a big focus of the recent conference, and this sounds really well aligned with the goals of that project.
Yeah, it's been going on for a while. So I know it's important to get the data from that. So we've carried out woofy analysis beforehand, and we're going to be able to plot and see with the sensors how it's performing in real time as well. It's not without its challenges, that project,
Yeah,
but
sure.
but it's I think with it as a reference, it's something that can be, I suppose, the UK in particular has had a lot of external wall installation installed, and a lot of it quite badly. So I guess that's what happens first every time. So
Yeah,
the
right.
second time round, we need to do it right.
Right. Experience curves.
Yeah, yeah.
Very cool. So your office is in the west of Ireland, is that right?
Yeah,
And
that's it.
which is pretty wet and rainy and humid, right?
Yeah,
So
it's all
it
of those things. Yeah.
hey, I can relate. I live in Seattle, so we get plenty of that.
Yeah.
So how does that impact product development at Partel? Is that a
Yeah,
factor?
definitely. Yeah. Kind of from, I suppose, quite close to us is one of the areas in the world with the highest rainfall. Um, it's also right beside the Atlantic, so that's always coupled with high winds. Or not always, but for most of the year. So yeah, we get rain 2 out of every 3 days. Um, One of the questions people actually always ask in Ireland is, why does nobody own or use an umbrella? And it's because you can't. Yeah.
Hey, we have very low umbrella use in the Pacific Northwest as well, so I
It's
can
the
relate.
horizontal rain,
Yeah,
isn't it?
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Any wind and there's no yeah. Anyway,
Yeah. So it's always been, I guess, um, whatever project you work on, if there's the smallest issue with just a tiny issue with the building envelope, it'll get found. So it definitely influences how we look at the exterior and the interior, like you say, because of humidity. So we've always kind of, since then, or with that in mind, thought of integrated systems. But for the exterior, we've looked at durability. So historically, the UK and Ireland and the US have used quite cheap house wraps, things like that. Maybe the flashing and the connection and how everything is put together is incomplete. So that's definitely an area that we focus on as a really robust, tough system.
You've had lots of roles in your career. We've touched on that a little bit in this conversation, from founder and technical director and project management, contracts management, R&D, product training. How have all these contributed to how Partel has evolved in the last 10 years? And what do you see coming in the next 10 years?
Okay, so yeah, I guess when you look back, the past certainly influences how you act. So those roles, you definitely need a strong technical knowledge, problem solving, sourcing, management. I guess a fair amount of business development and people skills. I think overall, the thing that we wanted to do was to do things ethically to a really high standard, and that's kind of the core about everything we've done. I would say in the future, things change, but the only thing I can see right now kind of is the focus on embodied energy and sustainable product development. Hopefully the new partnerships will develop, and I know that we'll do a lot with education and I suppose our own footprint as a company, our carbon footprint. I'm sure that'll be a big focus, and we've got some, I suppose, really interesting and meaningful things that we'll be looking at in the next couple of years.
Well, this has been a great conversation, Hugh. I know I've learned new things about you and about Partel. So I appreciate you sitting down and taking the time to talk with us and share. Is there anything else you'd like to touch on before we close up here?
No, just look, thanks for having us on, Zack. We're I guess always engaged and interested with what you guys are doing at the accelerator. So always exciting to be involved in that and to hopefully get the word out a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just, as a little teaser for listeners, Hugh, you and I and Yulia have been working on a pretty interesting series about high performance building practice in the UK and Ireland. So stay tuned for more about that, everybody.
Great. Thanks, Zack.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thanks, Hugh. Be well.
Cheers.
Take care.
Okay. Thank you.
And that was Hugh Whiriskey of Partel, founder of Partel, based in Galway, but pretty active now across parts of the US as well as Ireland and the UK. Is that right, Zack?
That's right. Partel has provided products to projects in New York and North America, and their presence is really growing. So it's cool to see. It's, and I've said this before, but this transition to high performance building and passive house building really depends on innovations from manufacturers, people figuring out what's missing in the marketplace or what could be improved in the menu and palette of products and components that goes into these buildings, and then figure out how to make those and manufacture them and share them with builders and designers. Yeah. So it's always, I think one of the things that's really fun about the work that we do at the Passive House Accelerator is that the partners that are supporting our work are so mission aligned and so passionate about this same goal of creating these, low carbon, climate wise structures. So yeah, I find Hugh's work inspiring. It's good. It's really cool.
Yeah. So they have a whole range of all the products that you need, going from the air tightness envelope, ventilation systems, but they also do some great services. He mentioned woofy modeling, because it's not just about providing products that people know what to do with necessarily. They've also got to know how it's all going to come together and if it's going to work or not. And there's a huge part of what people like Partel do is education. That seemed to be quite a big part of their operation.
It really is. And I think that through line between, his history as a practitioner and then now becoming a problem solver in the space of materials and tapes and membranes and all these things, it really lends itself well to that kind of knowledge sharing that needs to happen. I alluded to we're working actually with them on, and some other partners that they've brought together to do a series about high performance building practice in the UK and Ireland. So stay tuned for that, because it looks like it's going to be really interesting, and like with a lot of on-site video and diving into what it means to be creating these buildings in the UK and Ireland and in parts of Europe.
Yeah, it sounded like Hugh's got a few things on the boil that yet to be announced. So he kind of
that's right. He alluded to more. Exactly.
Yeah.
That piqued my interest, definitely.
Yeah, some exciting stuff. Some coming along. It really just coming back to the education thing. It really highlighted, and Hugh made this point that Passive House drives education in the building industry, even for buildings that and designers who aren't necessarily going to certify as Passive House. A lot of air tightness training, for example, comes out of Passive House. So that just reminded me of how important the work that a lot of practitioners and professionals in this world do. Even if they're not working on buildings that end up being certified, they're probably working on buildings and moving the industry in a much more positive direction and producing buildings that are going to be healthier and more efficient, lower carbon to operate than standard practice.
I mean, isn't that the thing that's so exciting about Passive House, is that it's about just building better buildings, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not about, solar panel. I mean, I love solar panels. It's not about solar panels. It's not about a bunch of checklist stuff. It's about creating really great buildings. So I think that's why it's so exciting for builders as well, because it's just taking this craft to a different level.
And not just creating great buildings, but fixing not so great buildings to become better buildings. Yeah. And he alluded to some projects, and I think he said 36,000 buildings that they were working on.
I know,
but that was just a drop in the ocean. It's like that's a pretty big drop,
right?
But I guess it is a pretty big ocean. It just underlines the scale of the issue of retrofitting houses. And Hugh said that going at the current rate, it would take over 100 years to retrofit everything. So we obviously need to accelerate that, because we for the sake of people living in those buildings and their health, but also the additional energy required to operate those is just not going to cut it in our brave new world of lower carbon. So fixing that from a technical and product supply perspective, or the systems required, it's a huge challenge, and it looks like it's one that Partel is embracing.
Right, it's like the tip of the spear of this whole movement. And it did, I think I mentioned in the interview, it was a really strong theme at the International Passive House Conference that just happened. And, they're talking about this approach, this outside approach to retrofits to Enerfit standard called Outfit at PHI. Yeah. So there's a lot of alignment with the work that Hugh is doing and that effort. So it's going to take a lot of players and a lot of innovators to be experimenting and sharing lessons learned and going through the experience curves for us to get to that place where we can really scale up and do this cost effectively. So hats off to Hugh, hats off to PHI and all the other players and Energy Sprong. This whole move to address our existing buildings, so important.
So Partel's been a great supporter of Passive House Accelerator and this podcast, of course. So great to have Hugh talking about the backstory and why he does what he does. Where can people find out about them and what they do?
Go to partel.com so PARTEL.com to see their website. And then also you can search for Partel on the Passive House Accelerator website and see content that is related to their work. And keep your eyes open. They're movers and shakers. They're doing lots of cool stuff.
And I think they've got a few other, or at least one other URL, their Ireland, partel.ie as well. So they're global, and .co.uk. So you can find Partel.
Thank you, Matthew. Well said. My North American centrism it's showing through yet again.
I'm not sure if they've cracked the Southern Hemisphere yet. So
yeah, it's a good question.
I think they've got more than enough to get on with across Europe, UK, Ireland, and North America.
Indeed.
Awesome. Hey, well, thank you to all our great listeners out there. Thanks again to Partel for being such a great supporter of the Accelerator and of this podcast. And thank you, Zack, for bringing Hugh on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Matthew.